Okay, so hello, welcome. Glad you came out for the International Entrepreneur. My name is Lon Safko, and I'm coming to you all the way from Los Angeles, California, USA. It's morning here, and it's nighttime there, so I'm glad you were able to set some time aside to come and listen to this presentation. We're going to talk about the International Entrepreneur and all the difficulties and opportunities that we have being an entrepreneur on a global basis. But first, I'd like to thank City Business School for inviting me to do this presentation. It's always a pleasure working with them. You guys are doing a great job, and I'm really proud to be part of your presentation series. So let's jump right into it. My name is Lon Safko, and I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. I've built 14 companies in my career. I have 18 inventions in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., along with 30,000 of my professional papers. I have 3 U.S. patents on three-dimensional internet advertising. I've written the Social Media Bible, which hit #1 on Amazon and exceeded $2 million in sales. I know a little bit about marketing and sales and being an entrepreneur. All the pluses and all the minuses of actually being an entrepreneur. We're going to talk about those right now. The reason that I'm so excited about being an entrepreneur at this time in history is because of the potential. If you look at some of these bullets here, you'll see that between now and 2021, we're going to see a 246% increase on online international sales. That means there's a $4.5 trillion opportunity for us if we know how to seize it, if we know how to be a global entrepreneur. And let me throw out some other statistics just to kind of put this in perspective. 83% of shoppers in Canada, 81% in Brazil, and 78% in Mexico all buy from international sellers. Now think about that. That's almost 80% in all 3 of those countries purchase from outside of the country. That's a huge opportunity that you have. And in the United States, almost 50%, almost 1 out of 2, half of every purchaser in America buys outside of the United States. So those statistics are absolutely true for Russia as well. I'm sure 50% of your population buys outside of Russia, and there's a huge global market. Inside of the United States, we have something called the Small Business Administration, SBA, and they help small businesses. What they've estimated is 96% of the world's consumers now live outside of the U.S. I understand that this is U.S.-centric, but if 98% of my buyers live outside of my country, it's got to be true for you as well. 96% of the buyers around the world has to be outside of Russia. So if you want to tap only 4% of your potential market, then you stay within your country. But if you want the other 96%, you have to step out. Let's take a look at some other trends. The International Post Corporation surveyed 29,000 international customers. And here's what it showed. It surveyed 30 different countries. 53% of all international e-commerce purchases went through one of 3 marketplaces. This is really important. I want you to pay attention. More than half of all the sales, international sales, went through Amazon, Alibaba, or eBay, those 3 companies. So as an entrepreneur, as a small business person, you really should seriously, if you're looking at selling and distributing internationally, you need to seriously look at those 3, because 50% of the world is buying from either Amazon, Alibaba, or eBay. The reason is that everybody's familiar with those 3 brands. We all feel comfortable purchasing in that environment. We know that our credit card information or our payment information is going to be safe. We know that they have very good return policies. We know that they'll stand behind us as a consumer, and even as a business person. They'll be there, and they're very reputable. So that's why more than half of the world trusts these 3 different companies. The other opportunity that we have in front of us is that they're in almost every country of the world. So by partnering and selling through one of these 3 companies, basically they open up the world for you. And it's an opportunity. You can't afford to build that type of a marketing or distribution channel, especially as an entrepreneur. So strategic partnering with these companies is really critical. The other thing is actually getting paid. You can make a lot of sales, but if you don't get paid, then you're not going to make that up in volume. You're going to be out of business. And getting paid is very difficult, and sometimes it's very expensive. So for example, every single time I get paid from a foreign country, I do a lot of work in Asia, I do a lot of work in India, I do a lot of work in Europe as well. Every time I get paid by a client, my bank takes about 1,000 rupees right off the top, about $15 US. And then there's lots of other transaction fees. Every time I use a credit card outside of my country, there's a fairly large fee. So making sure that your payment system is in place as an entrepreneur is critical, or otherwise either you'll be killed with fees or you're not going to get paid at all. Now think about it. If there's a wire transfer fee of $15 or 1,000 rupees and you're selling a $10 product, well, then you're going to be paying $5 more than you make on every single one of your products. So that's really important. Western Union is another really good way to pay people who work for you, outsourcing, and paying for product, but they're really expensive as well. They take as much as 12% of the cash that's transferred, and that's kind of ridiculous. PayPal seems to be about the best. I think I pay about 2.5% of whatever the transaction is, but you have the problem that they're not in every country. Not every country is reputable and can be trusted. For example, I have 2 people that work for me outsourcing in Pakistan, but PayPal refuses to go into Pakistan because it's unstable and it's not trustworthy. So I can't pay them. So I have to pay them. I actually pay somebody in Canada, and then the person in Canada somehow transfers the money to Pakistan. So be aware that different countries some are very easy to work with as far as getting paid. Some are really difficult. Some of them are just impossible. And another example, as I said, I do a lot of work. I do training and consulting in India, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Delhi, Kerala. And every time I come back from one of my trips, I have a whole pocket full of rupees. And up until about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I can bring those money from all over the world into Bank of America, where I bank, and they would do the currency conversion. They keep about 10% of it, but they would exchange any foreign money that I had for American dollars, make it usable again. But about 2 years ago, because of the counterfeit rate in India, Bank of America and all the other banks in the United States have stopped converting rupees. They won't touch them. So now either I have to remember to exchange it at the airport, or if I come back into the country with Indian rupees, I either throw them away or I give them to my grandkids to play with. So that really devaluates the rupee for me. So just be aware of all of these restrictions and conditions before you launch your product or your e-commerce store. Now, I want you to keep an eye on Payoneer. It's called Payoneer. It's like Pioneer. Payoneer. Payoneer's got a kind of an interesting setup. They're starting to grow very fast. They're in almost every country of the world. And what they'll do is they will set you up with a virtual bank account in the country that you're selling into. Your customers then pay into that bank, and then that bank wire transfers the money into your bank, whatever country it is, and that way you can then withdraw the money from your bank in the currency that you currently are using. So that's a really good way to do it. Now, the fees vary, so I would be very careful to look at whatever the fees are. And I'm sure the fees are going to be increased with countries that are a little bit more dangerous to do business in. Now, it wouldn't be fair to talk about getting paid unless we talked about blockchain and Bitcoin. These are really, really important. If you're not familiar with them as an entrepreneur, you need to be familiar. So here's a homework assignment. I'm going to check up on every single one of you to make sure that you've completed your homework assignment. I want you to go out and I want you to study just a little bit. It should only take you about 20 minutes, but read about blockchain and Bitcoin, because that is going to be a really interesting set of events over the next 4 or 5, even 10 years. Let me just go over it really briefly so at least you have a pretty good idea from when you leave this webinar, you'll understand. Blockchain is a series of computers that are connected through the internet, so they're interconnected. It requires a minimum of about 140 computers. And every time a transaction, a financial transaction takes place, all 140 of these computers has a ledger that gets updated. So if someone hacks into, say, computer number 15 and changes that ledger, it doesn't matter because the other 139 computers haven't been hacked into, and they will immediately identify the problem and then correct it, and then all 140 computers will be operating properly again. So it's an international way of keeping track of financial transactions on multiple computers so that the information can always be reliable. Does that make sense? That's blockchain. It's a chain of computers that keep track of these financial transactions. Now, Bitcoin is the digital currency that we use inside a blockchain, and it's international. There's multiple types of digital currency. Bitcoin was the first, it's the largest, but there are other names for this type of currency. And the whole idea, Satoshi Nakamoto is the person who invented this whole concept, and he did it in about 10 years ago in 2009. Nobody knows who he is, nobody can find him, but he's the guy who invented this. And the reason he did is because of the recession that the world went into in 2009. He wanted to create a digital currency that could be used around the world, and one where banks weren't involved, where they would take huge fees, similar to the fees that we just discussed. Every time you get a wire transfer, no matter how large or small, your bank takes 1,000 rupees or $15. So blockchain, the idea is to keep it digital and to keep the fees extremely low, not to make banks rich, basically. Now, there's a big problem, and I want you to be aware of this. Every country on earth is fighting this. Think about it. If Bitcoin becomes popular and Bitcoin actually starts to replace the value of the Russian ruble or the US dollar, then it's going to devaluate the entire currency of that country. So the United States has agreed to work with Bitcoin, but they're never going to allow it to actually become popular. So the problem is that we can buy and store Bitcoin, but trying to find a way to spend it or convert it into a local currency. That's what the problem is going to be. And honestly, I don't see any country on earth allowing this to happen because of the consequences of devaluating that country's currency. But it's huge, and it is being accepted, and it is being used around the world. So just be aware of it, and your homework assignment is to study it. The next thing that we need to talk about is manufacturing and distribution. If you're selling a virtual product, this isn't a problem. The internet will distribute it for you, and there is no manufacturing, and there's no shipping. But most of us sell tangible products, and that opens up a whole set of problems that you need to solve before you can actually distribute or sell internationally. First of all, who is manufacturing the product? Is it a product that you created and you're going to have the products manufactured and warehoused and stored, and then you're going to do the fulfillment? Or are you going to be a third party, an affiliate? Are you going to buy product, let's say from Alibaba, and then sell them through Amazon? So the question then becomes, how do you buy that product? Who ships it? Who warehouses it? And who fulfills it? Do you have to buy an entire container? One of the problems with Alibaba is you have to buy in bulk. So you have to buy 1,000 of something. That's going to require a lot of capital. If the product doesn't sell, then you have 1,000 and you have all that money tied up in that particular product, and you
could force you out of business and possibly even to debt. The other question is, will they drop ship smaller amounts? Can you buy 10 at a time? Okay, now you don't have as high a risk, but you're going to have more logistics. The next question is, whoever manufactures and distributes, will they do one up? Will they ship directly to your customer so that all you have to do is send them an invoice? They ship it directly to the customer? Most of the big companies like Alibaba will not do that. Amazon will definitely do it. The downside with Amazon is they want 3 of every one of your products for all in the United States for all 75 distribution centers. So that means 3 times 75. Okay, that's what, 225 units that are sitting in Amazon warehouses. Again, you're going to have a lot of cash tied up. So do you see how this starts to get a little bit kind of complicated? Who ships it and who does the fulfillment? And fulfillment gets pretty expensive, by the way, especially if you have a third-party company taking the product out of the warehouse and shipping it to the customer. So if your margins are low, like they have to be on Amazon, Amazon demands very, very low prices and very tight margins, then you may be in a situation where it doesn't pay to try to distribute through one of those 3 big companies. Now, China, you need to be aware of what's going on in China. We know that China is the largest communist country on the planet. We know that they have a tremendous buying power. We know that they have a tremendous manufacturing ability, but they're communist, so they don't really like capitalism. However, one of the funniest things that I think that could ever happen to a communist country is they took back Hong Kong. Hong Kong, for almost 100 years, has been the flagship of capitalism. It was the gateway to Asia for business. And now think about this. You have all this privatization, you have all this capitalism, and now China, communist, has to then take over ownership of Hong Kong. Completely different opposite. When I was teaching in Shanghai, I asked the audience, what do you think about this? This is a dichotomy. This is something that you have to deal with. And what do you think about capitalism in a communist country? And they all kind of smiled and lowered their head and they said, we like it. They do like it because it's profitable. It makes money for the individuals. And the government of China is having a real problem trying to keep this under control and balance it. However, they've put a lot of money into Beijing. Keep an eye on Beijing. The waterfront, the whole downtown area has been completely revitalized for international commerce. So we're seeing that even the largest communist country is embracing capitalism. Kind of weird, but it's happening in our lifetime. So when you look at China, China could be a huge market. Okay, here's something that you're not going to like to hear, and it created a lot of logistic problems here this morning because I don't speak Russian, and I apologize for that. You don't speak English, and you need to apologize for that because there's only one language in business globally, and unfortunately, that's English. And I apologize for that, but you have to learn English if you're going to do business internationally. As I said several times already, I teach all around the world, everywhere, Europe, Asia, and I never need an interpreter. I always can do it in English, and they understand. India, the second largest country on earth, English is their first language. They're taught English first, then they're taught 17 dialects of Hindi, depending upon where they live in India. Think about that, 17 different dialects, and one can't understand the other. But the one thing they have in common is English. The language of technology is also English. Everything that's done on the internet is done in English. So you gotta brush up on some English if you're going to do business internationally. 20% or a fifth of the Earth's population speaks English. Now, European countries are way ahead of the rest of the world. Asian countries are okay. They're actually pretty good. But the funny thing is, don't try to speak English in Italy. Go figure. I did have to have an interpreter when I taught in Milan. So, yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Outsourcing. I had a company that had over 30 employees, 25 satellite offices around my country, and that was a lot of logistics. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of payroll. I don't think I'd ever do that again. So for the last almost 20 years, I've been doing outsourcing. And with the internet, outsourcing is so simple. And you can get amazing talent, people that have PhDs but can't get work in their countries. It's just absolutely amazing. Sometimes I even feel guilty and I pay them more than what they ask because they're so talented. So if you're thinking about outsourcing, if you're thinking about hiring an employee, think about outsourcing. Here in the U.S., the two big ones are Fiverr, which we use it in the U.S., but it accesses people all over the world, and Upwork, and that used to be called Elance. Both of those are incredible sources of talent. Now you also want to do something like Toggle or Asana, which are project tracking. I don't do hourly. I never pay hourly. I pay by the project. I define the project as accurately as I can, and I pay a fixed fee. Sometimes I'll pay some money up front, and then I pay the balance when the job is completed. That's kind of the safest way to do that. So don't pay by the hour. Let me warn you about that. Now, does it work? Yeah. I hired 3 engineers, graphic designers basically. They were in Russia, coincidentally. One was from Vladivostok, one was from the Ukraine, and one was from Moscow. And these 3 designers actually worked for my company for 6 years. And we would connect via Skype. Sometimes we even connected through Second Life, the virtual reality platform. And we would have meetings and we would discuss the week's work or what the next project was. And it was great. And I would pay them through Western Union. So it worked out really well. And for 6 years they worked for me. And now I just had a Pakistani gentleman do my website, and I have a virtual assistant that's in Pakistan. And I use PayPal for them through other countries. So outsourcing, really, really important. A huge worldwide pool of great talent. Selling it to foreign countries. There's a lot that you have to be aware of besides what we talked about, manufacturing and distribution, because once you get money involved, the countries want to get involved. So if you have virtual products, one of my companies is virtual. I sell architectural PDFs, basically, and I have to be very careful where I sell them because you can, if it's a actual product, a brick and mortar type product, you can get taxed on the country that manufactures it. You can get taxed on the country that the customer lives in, and then you can get taxed again on the country that you live in, because that transaction really is in all 3 countries. And if you have to pay 3 times the normal tax of everyone else, it becomes prohibitive. So you need to be aware of that. This is a little clip of my royalty statement. And if you see the way Amazon does it, they do the United States, they do Denmark, the UK, France, Spain, Japan, and they have individual companies that do those transactions. That money then is transferred into Amazon US, and then that money goes directly into my account. And the good news is I don't have to pay taxes on any of that all the way through the process until it comes into my company. And then I simply pay the one tax that my company would pay on capital gains. So if I expense it, then I don't have to pay the tax on it at all. So that's really critical for you to understand, that how the money flows from manufacturer to you to customer and then eventually to your bank. Also be aware that a lot of products are prohibitive in certain countries. For example, I teach in Dubai, which is the United Arab Emirates, and I love Dubai. Wonderful, wonderful city. However, it's about 12 hours different time zone than the one that I live in Los Angeles. So I have to get up at 2000 hours. I have to start teaching really, I have to hit it hard from 2000 all the way until probably 500. That's my day, and then I get to relax, and that's after being on a plane for 21 hours. So I like to have a glass of wine. I like to have a drink. In the U.S., we drink quite a bit. I know in Russia you like to drink. Well, you're not allowed to drink in the United Arab Emirates. So when I know that I'm going into Dubai, I make sure that I don't pack any alcohol in my suitcase because I don't want customs to see me smuggling alcohol into a dry country. See, so these are all these cultural differences you need to be aware of as you then do business in each of these different countries. Shipping into foreign countries, that's also a real hassle unless you figure out how it's done. Customs can be a real pain in the neck. I'm in the United States. Canada is just to our north. We're adjacent countries, and I won't sell to Canada. Customs is so difficult and so expensive and requires so much paperwork that to sell a $10 product in Canada is not worth my time. So if I have a customer, I'll tell them I'll ship it virtually, but I cannot ship a physical product. It just doesn't make any sense. And for example, people in the United States love Italian cheese, some of the best cheese in the world. But if you buy Italian cheese, you can't have it from Italy. You can't have it shipped into the country unless you go through someone who has a permit to ship in cheese. So you can buy it, but you can't bring it into the country. So be aware of all of the restrictions, the import tax, all the paperwork that's involved. The IPC survey found that 62% of international buyers still expect free shipping. That's also important, and I want to just take a moment to let that sink in. The problem that we're having is Amazon has something called Prime. Anywhere in the United States, anything that's sold on Amazon, which is almost everything, will be shipped to you within 2 days for no shipping cost whatsoever. Now, as a consumer, I absolutely love that. And sometimes it comes the next day, which is crazy. But people are now beginning to expect that. In a recent survey, 62% of international purchasers felt that shipping should be free. And as we all know, international shipping actually is often prohibitive. It's so expensive. And then we have all of the customs, import tax, and other problems that are thrown on top of that. So also be aware of that. Now, I'm not going to read through these, but if you want these slides, go to lonsafko.com, lonsafko.com. Click on the access button. It says get access, and put in your email address. I'll send you a password, and take that password and go back and go into the restricted area, go to login, and all these will be available because I want you to read these. You've heard me talk about them, but when you read them, it's going to help reinforce it. Know your shipping. Let me just quickly go through some of these because this is really important. Know the international demand for your product. As I said, our demand in the United States for my virtual architectural PDFs is very high. So we know that the United States is a great market. Outside of the United States, it's much, much weaker. We can generate sales, but the sales compared to the inconvenience of shipping and doing business outside of the United States isn't worth it. So on that one particular company, I've turned off everything outside of the United States. Now, I have sold to Greece and England and different parts of the world, but I do it one up. The customer contacts me, I make the arrangements, I find out what the shipping costs are going to be, and they pay me through PayPal. So understand that not every country is a country that you should necessarily sell into because it may not be enough business there to make it worth your while. Also, use a technology-based shipping system because it knows all of the restrictions. The system knows what the import taxes are. It knows all of the things that would take you a lifetime to learn, especially if you're shipping into multiple countries. So having an electronic system, some kind of a where you could put the information in and then it punches out all the paperwork that's necessary, that's critical. That really is worthwhile, and almost anything that you pay for that would be definitely worth your time. Control your shipping costs by using a parcel consolidator. Now, a lot of people probably haven't heard of it. Maybe you haven't heard of a parcel consolidator. If I ship one product to one customer in a foreign country, that one product has to be personally handled all the way through to that customer's hands. A consolidator will take a bunch of products from a lot of different companies. It will put it on a pallet, and then that entire pallet gets shipped to that country at a much reduced fee. I believe that that's what Alibaba and a lot of other Chinese companies do, because anything that you order from Amazon that comes from China takes 3 weeks to get here. So they put it on a pallet, it's much cheaper, and then each of the companies who have product on that pallet pays a portion of the shipping. So it could be 1/10 of the cost by using a consolidator. Pretty weird, but could you imagine saving 90% of your shipping costs? Make sure that all the duties on that package has already been paid, because if the delivery company has to collect money to deliver the product, there's going to be fees, or there's a possibility that your customer may never see that product. So that's another reason that it's a good idea to have an electronic shipping system. Let's see, trade documentation, paperless. And the last thing that's really important is never misrepresent the value. Yes, if you say that the product is worth its actual value, you will pay an appropriate import tax. And if you said that it was less, well, let me tell you, customs opens boxes, they open envelopes, they x-ray things, they know what stuff is worth, and they know what you're shipping. So if you lie about the value of the product going into that particular country, there's a good chance that it'll get confiscated and you'll lose the entire product. The customer won't get it and you won't get it back either. So make sure your paperwork is truthful and make sure it's accurate. We doing okay? I know this is a lot, especially with the translation. So hang in there. This is good. And this will be available on demand. So head over to the business college and make sure that you click on the link and re-watch this on demand, either in English or Russian, which is great that they're doing in both. Way to go. Citizenship and taxation. You heard me mention before, but I wanted to give it its own slide so that you understand that you have to thoroughly investigate and know how you're going to be taxed, because you could, again, be taxed in the country that you're buying the product from as a sales tax. You can be taxed in the country that you're selling it to as a sales tax to the customer, and then you get taxed in the country that you reside. So make sure that you know what that entire process is so that you can minimize your costs, because otherwise you could be actually losing money. And then, of course, all of the restrictions, like I discussed a moment ago. Credit card fraud and payment fraud. It's a big problem. It's a really big problem outside of the United States, especially in Asia. Asia, it's rugged. And I'll be honest with you, some of the biggest problems that I had came out of Russia. So you have to be very careful. You can do the best job of being an entrepreneur and doing e-commerce, but if you don't get paid in the end, then you're out of business and you're in debt. So let me talk about a couple of the experiences that I've had. For one, in the United States, we have the Consumer Credit Protection Act. All that means is, but it's important to us as business people, is that if a credit card gets stolen, a credit card number gets stolen, and a fraudulent purchase is made on that credit card, the owner of the credit card, so if I have a credit card and someone uses my credit card illegally, fraudulent purchase, all I have to do is notify the bank, and the bank will refund that purchase price back to my credit card. Pretty good from a consumer perspective, right? No matter what anybody does with my credit card, the bank will give me back that money and never charge me for it. I like that. But from a business side, wait a minute, the product has been delivered, the product has been purchased, the product has been picked up. So who pays for that? Let me tell you, it's the business person, it's the retailer. So any product that gets sold under a fraudulent transaction Even if the credit card company themselves approves it, the business person still has to eat the cost of that product. And that does happen to us occasionally. A product will ship, it's a fraudulent charge, they'll dispute it, the credit card holder, they get to keep the product, and we get the debt. So that's why it's really important to understand who's handling the payment system, whether it's PayPal, whether it's a credit card company, or somebody else. Very, very important. Let me give you a particular example. A couple of years ago, in one of my companies, Paper Models Online, they're the ones that do the architectural PDFs, we wanted to start an affiliate program. So we set up, it took us a really long time to set up a very elaborate, very sophisticated affiliate program, and we brought some affiliates in, and we did background checks, and we thought that they were good, and looked online, and we didn't have any problems, and they began to sell. And all of a sudden, the next day, sales were increasing like crazy. We were really excited because, wow, why didn't we do this sooner? As the president of the company, every sale that goes through the company, I get a copy of it in my email. I get a copy of the invoice. And I glance at it because I want to know what products are selling, which ones aren't. And I noticed the very first sale that went through that there was an inappropriate product going to a certain place in the U.S. And what I mean by that is there was a California mission, a church, a whole bunch of them, of these architectural PDFs being shipped to Florida. That's the other side of the country, and it has nothing to do with California. And I thought, no, that doesn't make any sense. So I actually shut the store down. My two partners got really angry because I shut the store. I said, freeze all sales, don't ship anything. I then got on the internet, did a couple of tricks, and I pinged the sale. Here's what happened. The person in Florida who is getting the product, the sale, first of all, the credit card was accurate, wasn't reported stolen, the number was good, the address that they gave was good. I was able to see the house on Google Maps, so I knew that that was all legitimate. But the sale went from my company to Virginia, then over to Hong Kong, and then to Moscow. Here's what happened. There was a gang in Moscow that had stolen credit cards. They would then team up with affiliate salespeople. The affiliates would use the stolen credit card information, make thousands of dollars worth of purchases, have those products shipped to the customer. Customer's not going to report it or complain at first until they get their bill. They get all these products. Then they would complain. The card would get shut off. But by then, my company and other companies would have already paid the affiliates their 20 or 25% commission on the sales of all of these fraudulent sales. And then, of course, once they had their money, they would disappear. So we never did affiliate marketing again because we couldn't control the fraud. But it was that elaborate. It turned out it went to a laptop in a university in Moscow somewhere. That's where it all originated. But it could have just as easily been in Bangkok. So you have to be very, very, very careful because you absorb the losses. International communications. If you're going to have customers and if you're going to be outsourcing, you need to have a way to communicate with them. They need to talk to you. They're going to want to ask questions. By far, email is the best. No question about it. Email is awesome. But face-to-face contact is good, especially with outsourcing. So you're going to want something like Slack, which will interface with Salesforce. You're going to want Skype, voice over internet protocol. That's a typo. For example, you can't use Skype in the United Arab Emirates because they own the phone company and they don't want you using the internet to bypass the phone company because they can't charge you for it. Go figure. If you're in Asia, you want to use something called WhatsApp. Huge in Asia. Absolutely doesn't work. Nobody uses WhatsApp in the United States. FaceTime, yeah, that works pretty much everywhere because that does work over the internet. Privacy and spam is a big deal. You know that. You've heard about it. You heard the GDPR that just came down in April. The European Union of countries all agreed that they're getting tired of people, Facebook, selling their information and spamming them. So if you're selling into the EU at all, you need to be 100% aware of what the restrictions are, because there are teeth. They really can find the heck out of any company that doesn't follow those guidelines. The same thing with the 2004 CAN Spam Act. That was passed in 2003 and enacted in 2004 here in the United States. Basically what it says is you're not allowed to send an unsolicited commercial email. It's just that simple, unsolicited commercial email to any customer. If they didn't require, if they didn't sign up, if they didn't double opt in, then you don't have a right to send them an email. Every email has to have an unsubscribe at the bottom of it, so it's easy for them to unsubscribe. And you have to remove that email address within 10 days. If you send them a second email after 10 days, in the United States, you can be fined up to $2 million for each email. $2 million. Now, nobody's ever been fined that high, but companies have been fined. So you have to be aware of both of these. And that means sending emails into the United States, or sending any kind of information to the European Union. Now, this is a list, just to make it easy for you. Here is a list of the European Union countries so that you understand who is being governed by these new laws. So if you sell into any of these countries, you have to be prepared to satisfy the requirements of that act, that law. In the United States, we're very pro-entrepreneur, very pro. We even have a law that says if you're an entrepreneur and you want to come to the United States to develop that idea, that will give you a temporary visa, or what they call a parole. So you can stay in the United States under a work visa if you're an entrepreneur. How cool is that? So if you are an entrepreneur, you want to be an entrepreneur, and the country that you're in doesn't support you being an entrepreneur, for example, China, look at other countries that are entrepreneur friendly, because you'll find that you can go to those countries, you can do business, and there might even be tax relief. Just generally speaking, based on my traveling experience, look at the type of political systems that each of the countries have. That'll give you a good barometer of whether or not you should do business in those countries. A democracy? Absolutely. Yeah, we're all about capitalism. We love it. Democracy works. Monarchy? Same thing. England, great doing business with England. A republic? Yeah, like the Republic of the Congo. Yeah, I would definitely stay away from that. Communist country? Use caution, because the rules are different. Just be aware. Socialist, same thing. For the most part, safe. I've done a lot of business with Sweden. Wonderful country to work with. They're socialist. Not a problem, but be aware. And if it's a dictatorship, just run. Just run as fast as you can. Don't even touch it. Marketing internationally. Gosh, there are so much I can say about marketing internationally. This is a McDonald's menu basically for the same products. When I was in Bangkok, I was really hungry one morning, and I was looking for a McDonald's because I wanted an Egg McMuffin. And in the United States, an Egg McMuffin has an English muffin, cheese, an egg, and sausage. Oh, I couldn't wait. And I found the McDonald's in Bangkok, and when I went in, their breakfast special was an egg poured over the top of a pile of rice. So yeah, I didn't have breakfast that morning, even though I was really hungry. I waited for lunch. So even though the McDonald's menu almost always is identical in every country that you go to, they have to make changes. For example, you're not going to find a hamburger in India. Remember, the cows are sacred. So fast food doesn't sell. There's a lot of chicken, not so much pork because of the Muslim influence. That's also something that you have to be very careful of. Halal is, if you're dealing with food products, is very, very, very strict. True halal 5-star restaurants can't even have pork in the kitchen. Everything is either chicken or goats. So food is a big deal. But also, you have to understand the climate, the competitive climate, the economic climate of doing business. So do some research before you just simply launch a product into a new country. For example, when I released the Social Media Bible about 10 years ago, everybody was writing books, and everybody became an expert on social media in the United States, and the competition was ridiculous. I wrote the biggest book on earth on social media. It's still the biggest book, covers everything. So I kind of was more of an expert than them, but I didn't want to compete. It was just too difficult. So that's why I taught Kuala Lumpur, Shanghai, Singapore, Bangkok, Mumbai, Hyderabad, New Delhi, Netherlands, Vienna, Italy. I just marketed myself outside of the United States. It was easier and it was more profitable. See, so sometimes not selling in your own country could be an advantage if you understand the climate. Okay, the last subject here, and then we're going to open it up to some questions. Get your questions ready. I don't see any in the chat box yet, but I'll hold them off because we're pretty close. Translation versus localization. I had a computer software product a few years ago, and we were selling into Sweden. Huge market. The government, it's a socialist country, and the government was actually representing the product, which was great. It's a great distribution channel. And I went over to Sweden, and I worked with a team of engineers for 3 weeks, taking every single word in that entire software and converting it from English into Swedish. It wasn't as easy as you think. Believe it or not, there was a lot of words that simply didn't have a translation. One of them was environment. It was a piece of software that would do home automation, and it was called environment. There is no word. Milieu was as close as we can come, but it wasn't very accurate. So we settled for it, but it was a problem. Translation and localization is completely different. Google does a great job in translating websites. Not a perfect job, but a really good job. Google Translate will take text that you type in and translate it. But if you want to see how good it is, take Russian, translate it to English, copy the English, put it back over here, translate it back into Russian, and you're going to see that it almost makes no sense whatsoever. Computers are not very good at translating. Even humans are not that good at translating. So localization is really important. Let me give you an example of that too. And by the way, technology, again, English first language. Websites, English first language. So I got to stress that point. My son was a director for Macy's, the retail outlet in Arizona. He was HR director, and he also ran the consumer credit card division for Macy's. And they outsourced all of their telephone representatives to India. That was a huge trend here in the United States, getting customer service from India. And they were taught first language, but they don't understand the nuances of the English language. And here was an example that cost this Indian company, Macy's, a huge $100 million contract. A customer, one of the reps, a customer called to apologize for making a payment on the credit card late. And when the rep from India asked why she made a late payment, she said that she had lost her husband. The rep said, "I'm going to put you on hold while you go find him so you can make the payment." Now, in Indian English, if you lose your husband or you lose your car keys, you can find them. In American English, when you lose your husband, that means that they're dead. And for the rep to be so callous as to say, "I'm going to put you on hold while you go find your dead husband so you can make a payment," actually that cost that Indian company that contract. So colloquialisms, nuances, local words, it's difficult. You got to be aware. All right, let me give you a couple of fun examples of translation versus localization, and then we'll jump into some questions. Here, we all know Ford Motor Company. When they were selling one of their cars in Belgium, what they said is that every car has a high quality body. That means the body is very well built. That's one of the things that Mercedes-Benz says, high quality body. But when it actually translated into Belgium, it said every car has a high quality corpse. So selling a car with a dead body in the trunk probably didn't do much for their sales. Kentucky Fried Chicken, they expanded into China Huge market, great place for fried chicken. I'm assuming that you understand and know who Kentucky Fried Chicken is. I'll bet you have Kentucky Fried Chicken in Russia. Their saying is finger licking good, and it's always been that way for 50 years, finger licking good. But when they translated that saying into Chinese, it actually came out, eat your fingers off. Again, you think they would have had somebody check it. And by the way, if anybody has ever built anything from IKEA and tried to read the instructions, or bought something from China and tried to read the instructions, you would think that they would have at least someone native to that country read the instructions one time. In the United States, we also have a very popular beer brand called Coors, and they had a slogan, they had an advertising campaign that said, turn it loose. Well, unfortunately, turn it loose, when it translated in Spain, what it meant is suffer from diarrhea. So, yeah, not a good idea for a product. And here's a couple other ones. Braniff Airlines they were bragging about their leather seats. And remember, leather is cow skin. So when that got translated, it didn't say fly in leather. It ended up saying fly naked. Now, that might have appealed to some audience and maybe increased the sale in that demographic, but across the board, probably not so much. Clairol, which is an American beauty product, they had a curling iron, and it gave off water, a little bit of mist, which helped the hair curl better. But in Germany, the word mist means manure, like cow manure. So you put this curling iron in your hair and it would spit out manure. Again, not a good way to sell a product. Coca-Cola, when they first translated into China, in this, I don't even know what to say, but when they translated the name Coca-Cola, it translated to bite the wax tadpole. Wax like in a candle, tadpole like in a baby frog. I don't even know what to say to that. Colgate, which is the biggest toothpaste brand here in the United States, launched their product called Q, and what they didn't realize is that was the name of the most popular French pornographic magazine in France. So that didn't go down well. Gerber is our largest baby food manufacturer here in the United States, and when they released their product in Germany, the customers saw the word Gerber, which loosely translates in Germany to vomit. So they thought that the jars were actually filled with baby vomit. Not good. IKEA released a cart that had wheels on it. So, and the word F-A-H-R-T means move, travel, wheels. So they called it the fartful cart. In the U.S., fart means flatulence, means gas coming out of the other end. So that campaign crashed. Ford, they released the Pinto. This is quite a few years ago in Brazil. And the word Pinto in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, means tiny male genitals. Probably wasn't a lot of sales on that car. There was a company that sold chicken, Purdue Chicken, one of the biggest in the United States. And their slogan is, it takes a tough man to make a tender chicken. Well, when it got translated, here it comes. It takes a sexually stimulated man to make a chicken affectionate. I can't imagine what the billboards on that did. Yeah, that didn't work. And then Gerber again, there was a problem when they started selling into Ethiopia because most people, quite a few people in Ethiopia, are illiterate. They can't read. So on the labels, they would put pictures on the cans and jars of what was actually inside the jar. So you can tell when they saw the Gerber baby on the jar, it made them a little bit concerned that there was babies in the jar. Okay, let's open it up. So there's a bunch more. And I'm not going to do them because I want you to download these slides from lonsafko.com. We're going to open it up to questions because we have a few minutes left here. There's a summary. Okay, we're at the end. Now we're going to open it up for questions. What questions do you have? You've got to have a lot of questions. That was a lot of content in there. Make sure you get the slides. Make sure you watch this again on demand. All right, questions. Let me turn my speaker back on so I can hear our interpreter. Are we a go? Everything going well? Everybody has to ask at least one question, or you're paying for dinner. Here in Los Angeles. Okay, we see one question coming in here. I see more questions coming in, but I don't see the questions. I just see people typing. Should I switch to the other screen? Okay. There's a whole lot of questions, but they're all in Russian. So we need them interpreted and put in the chat box of the English presentation, please. I still don't see any questions on the English one. I see a lot of them on the Russian one. Yes. Ah. There we go. I also put an infographic up on that page where you can download the slides. It has a lot of information on it that's great for entrepreneurs because it has a lot of links. What do you think about real estate business? Anything you can advise that can be done internationally? I love real estate. I think real estate is terrific. Yes, you can be a broker and broker properties to expats, expatriates. That's a big deal for entrepreneurs right now in foreign countries like Thailand, for example. Canada, a lot of people when they retire can't afford to live on a retirement fund in Canada, so they're going to countries that are less expensive to live in. So yeah, the real estate, absolutely. Buying and selling, brokering across international borders. Yeah, GDPR. Take a look at it. Look at my definition and then just simply Google it. It's really important that you follow those guidelines because the penalties are quite high. The other thing is that the guidelines are very easy to follow. It's basically just respecting the rights and privacy of the people whose information that you gather. So I strongly recommend it. The other thing that I recommend is have a privacy policy on your website that adheres to the GDPR. And that's also easy. I'll give you a hint. Entrepreneurs are really good at stealing, being inspired. So go to a country that does business internationally, look at their privacy policy, maybe make a copy of it, change it around to meet your requirements, be inspired by it. But make sure you hit all the bullet points because it's important. Okay, Get access, we got that. How do you think, what is the influence of the BBB international market? You know, Better Business Bureau, I personally think that it's an antiquated concept. I never participated in them because I've never had any complaints, and I didn't see that it was that useful. If you want to see if you should be doing business with a particular company, you Google it. Google is like the worldwide Better Business Bureau. I don't want to beat up BBB, but I don't think that there's any value to it anymore because you get newer, more accurate results. Just type in review and either the name of the product or the name of the company. And Amazon has built-in reviews. So yeah, I don't see that they're that valuable anymore. Okay. What's the difference between entrepreneurship in Russia and the rest of the world? To be honest with you, I've only been an entrepreneur in the United States. Now, I've taught and spoke about it in the rest of the world. Every country has unique laws, restrictions, supports, taxation. They're all completely different. What I would recommend in Russia is take a look around, Google this, and see if there is a Russian Entrepreneur Association, a countrywide group of entrepreneurs that get together, that has a website that answers questions. There's dozens and dozens of them in the United States. So if you're an entrepreneur in the United States, you can Google it and all the answers can be found online. And you can go to weekly meetings or monthly meetings. There's emails, there's webinars, and I'm absolutely sure that that type of information is available in Russia. Just Google it and see what's available, especially locally, because you may want to go and meet other entrepreneurs, because that's the best way to get questions answered. Let's see, registration of legal entry is required. Yep. Not that I'm aware of. The question is it required for legal entry required? If you're going to actually physically enter the United States, it's required. But to sell within the United States, I don't think that you have to fill out any forms. But that's something that you may want to check. Again, even if I knew it, that could change, because you know the internet is really expanding quickly and the laws are changing rapidly. One of the worst laws that just took place is they're going to tax every transaction now, every sales transaction that happens on the internet. The internet helped entrepreneurs and small businesses because if the transaction took place on the internet, you didn't have to pay sales tax. Then they changed the law that if your company is based in one of our states, like California, you only had to pay sales tax if a transaction took place in California. Now, they say that you have to pay the tax everywhere in the United States. So that's just recent, as well as the GDPR. So Google that if you would, please. That way you get the most accurate answer. For work in some countries, it's legal. Did you have? You know what? I did have some experience in Thailand. It's an interesting place. Generally, it's very, very poor, but it's large, and it has a relatively good atmosphere for business. I liked doing business in Thailand. Again, I would ask you to take whatever your specific questions are, send them to me, or the best thing to do is just Google those specific questions. But I think doing business in Thailand, I think, is a really good idea. Of course, there's some restrictions, and it's going to be considerably different than doing business in Russia or the United States. But generally, the climate is very good over there. Let's see. Can you advise how to find an idea? Yeah, to find a good idea, look what's currently selling. Take a look on Amazon at the most popular products that are being sold. If you see what people are buying and you sell that type of product, there's a good chance that you're going to be successful. About 2 years ago, customized T-shirts, silk screen T-shirts was a big deal, so that you can buy a container of these T-shirts from China for pennies and sell them on Amazon. A lot of people made a lot of money. Cables, charger cables for all the different smartphones. That was a huge thing. Spinners, spinners was huge. Buy a container out of China or a pallet of them, put them into convenience stores, sell them online. So the best way is to take a look at what's selling on Amazon, the most popular products. The second thing is go into Google AdWords. Google AdWords. Take a look at the keywords that are being used. Just kind of run your fingers down the screen and look at what most people are looking for. Now, that's a little harder search because it's more broad. But that will also kind of give you an idea where the trends are going. But Amazon's probably the best way to do that. And there's a thank you, and I thank you very much as well. Lon, do you think that sanctions that are being prepared and already introduced by the U.S. government add to the risks of doing? Yeah, so the question is do I think that the sanctions that the U.S. are preparing to put on Russia will impact international business for entrepreneurs? Unless I know what the sanctions are and how severe they're going to be, I can't specifically answer that. But still, I would say that it will impact your ability to sell products into the United States, but I don't think that it really will impact your ability to sell products to other countries outside of the United States, especially selling within Russia. I mean, again, most of my companies only sell within my country because it's just easier and more cost effective. No matter what the U.S. does in sanctions won't affect your ability to sell inside of Russia. So let's wait and see what happens. I'm not a political expert. I don't like politics, but one thing I can say is that our president, he likes to bark, making you think he's going to bite. And then when everybody gets a little bit nervous, he has a tendency to then back down. So he's threatening these sanctions. How severe they end up, I don't know. That's between Putin and Trump. So, but I think selling inside your country will be just fine. Do you think sanctions are prepared? Okay, other questions. We are, 10 minutes past the hour, which is great because we were trying to shoot for about an hour plus. Any other questions? Now's your chance. Or feel free to send me an email anytime. I'm happy to help you any way I can. My email is just lonsafko@lonsafko.com. Okay, let's see. Is that another? When foreign companies organize businesses in Thailand, for example, for each working foreigner, there must be at least 3 local residents. Okay. Many companies are forced to attract local residents for the purpose of publicly providing regulatory measures to reduce the unemployment. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Good, thank you for letting me know that. Again, I've done work in Thailand, but I have never set up a company in Thailand. You know, the United States is kind of the same way, that you have to have a local resident or a local address for that company. And yeah, that would make sense. So see, that's one of those things that you can Google and find out. Good, I'm glad you shared that with us. Please describe the image of a successful international entrepreneur. What qualities? All right, I'm going to answer that question and then we'll wrap it up. What are the qualities of an international entrepreneur? Stamina. You have to stick with it. You have to have a positive attitude. Some days you're successful, some days you are absolutely unsuccessful. You have to be prepared to live the rest of your life, or at least the life of an entrepreneur, with the highest highs and the lowest lows. One day you're going to be negotiating $1 million, a 10 million rupee contract with a big company. The next day that deal will fall apart and you won't be able to make payroll. You won't be able to pay the rent. So, but the following day, you'll save that deal and you'll make that money and you'll be successful and you won't have to work for someone else again. So there's that hope. So the most important thing is, especially if you have employees, you always have to be positive. Every single employee will turn to you for vision and for enthusiasm, for excitement, for support, for direction. So as an entrepreneur, you have to provide that. Your spouse is going to turn to you for enthusiasm and for support and for optimism. So never give up. That's one of the number one rules. If you don't quit, you can't lose. I'm going to say that one more time. If you don't quit, you can't lose. So go out there, be an entrepreneur. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. I'd like to personally thank the City Business College, City Business School for having me participate in this webinar and share all this information. Please feel free to send me an email. Go over to my website, download the slides, download that infographic, Lon Safko at lonsafko.com or just lonsafko.com. Thank you very, very much for coming out. I know that it's your evening, and I really appreciate you being here. And with that, I'm going to sign off from Los Angeles. This is Lon Safko. Thank you.